Namaskaram. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen.
We will begin the program by small invocation.
Thank you.
My warm welcome and loving namaskars to everyone present. I welcome Swami Mahipalanchi Maharaj to this program. It is my great honor to welcome and introduce the speaker of the session, Mr. Matt Poepsel. Matt Poepsel is a distinguished writer, speaker, and a leadership expert renowned for his profound insights into organizational performance and personal growth. He has an impressive academic background that includes a PhD in psychology, an MBA, and a certificate of management excellence from the Harvard Business School. His extensive knowledge stems from his diverse experience, spanning various roles as a software executive and consultant, a US Marine, an Ironman triathlete, and a student of Buddhist philosophy, each one contributing to his unique approach towards leadership. Currently serving as the VP at the Predictive Index, Matt is celebrated as the godfather of talent optimization and has made significant contributions to Boston's tech industry. His acclaimed book, Expanded Circle, offers an enlightening perspective on leadership. Matt Poepsel's diverse experiences and deep expertise make him a compelling speaker and a key reference person in the realm of leadership and personal development. Now there will be a small presentation on Matt Poepsel.
Thank you very much for having me today. I'm honored to be with you and share some of my experiences and my works, and I can only hope that they provide you some sense of benefit to the work that you do.
Matt, I'll just interrupt you for a moment.
Yes.
Yeah, we have an introduction where our audience would like to know more about your work. So we'll have a small video presentation. Later we'll have a small presentation on this program so you can get to know what we do here. After that, we'll invite you to do a talk. Thank you.
My name's Matt Poepsel. It's a tough question. You already stumped me. It wasn't on the list. What do I do? I'm on a mission to liberate leaders from outdated attitudes and beliefs that hold us back from our full potential. I enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps, and I reported for boot camp, and it turned my world completely upside down. From day one, they did two things. They shaved my head, and then they shoved into my hand this book about leadership principles. So I just started to act like all the other Marine leaders that I had seen. I was rough, and I was serious, and I was profane, and I thought, this isn't me at all. So during the last year and a half of my enlistment, when everyone else would hit the bars, I would hit the book. And I discovered a PhD program in psychology that would fit my schedule, and I enrolled immediately. Once I started to settle into my own natural leadership style, everything flowed so much more smoothly. And for whatever reason, like a flash of lightning came to me, and I said, what if this could be your life? Helping other people be successful, learn about topics like leadership. What if that was really what you were meant to do? When I talk to early career leaders, they're extremely frustrated because leadership is not so straightforward. It's not a recipe book. It's not something you can just Google. We used to have to toil to meet even our most basic physical needs. Well, now, meeting our physical needs, I can do that with just about any job. Well, what about our belonging needs? What about our needs to develop and grow? What we find is that today, workers also want to be part of something bigger than themselves, but our leadership approaches haven't evolved. There's these really human needs that we have at work, and what I find is that the latest generations to enter the workforce are really attuned to express their needs in these areas, these human areas. They need empathy, and this is the opportunity.
Vidyashala conducts various activities that help in the holistic development of the students. There will now be a small presentation on the various activities conducted in Vidyashala. Now I humbly request sir to begin the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. That is that you have going on. It's unbelievable presentation so far. I'm very impressed. It's going to make mine pale by comparison, perhaps, but it's been a long time since I was sitting as a student where you are now. And I'm just honored to be spending some time with you today. I hope that the talk can provide some benefit. Maybe you'll find a morsel or a crumb in here that can help you in terms of the way that you approach your scholastic opportunity, as well as the work with those around you. So I'll go ahead and get started with this. Our path today that we're going to cover in the time that I have before we have some time for question and answer at the end is going to include three key things. One is I'll share some areas of my own life and my lessons learned. And I think that you'll find, hopefully, that there's a couple of themes in there that might also pertain to what you're experiencing, the type of way that you approach your work today. So you can think of it almost like a movie, right? You see somebody on the screen like this, I'm not as handsome as your normal leading man, perhaps, but hopefully you'll find that just as you can connect with sometimes stories in the movies or characters that have certain experiences, maybe you'll find something on my journey that pertains to yours, and that would make me very happy. Next, I'm going to share a progressive framework that I use to help me understand organizations and how they progress, but also for us as individuals. And I think it will apply equally for you as students and your opportunity as well. So we'll take a look at that three-part framework. And finally, we'll want to end with some practical applications. I always want to be clear when I leave you with what you can do next. If you have found something that really resonates with you, where should you go from here? So I'm going to be sharing a lot of those thoughts and experience, but I want you to know this. My biggest interest is your true potential. I'm intensely interested in helping you be at your best, lead at your best, both for the sake of those tasks that you're trying to accomplish, as well as the welfare of those around you. And so, while I'll be talking a little bit about my own observations and some of my experiences, just remember that this entire path is really all about you. Now, I'm going to need your help. I'm going to try to make some connections throughout to the life of a student, right? But I won't do a perfect job. So I need you to meet me halfway. Try to find some of the elements and think deeply about how these apply to your life and the work that you do, both inside the school and out. So with that as our agreement, I'll go ahead and get us started. Now, you saw that I was a U.S. Marine. I would say from the time that I was 10 years old, I knew that I wanted to serve in the U.S. Marine Corps. This was a big deal for me because not all of my friends and family had had military service like this. But there was something I couldn't explain that was a calling that made me want to take up this path. And so I chose the Marines because they were the toughest of the branches of the armed services. And I wanted to have this membership, if you will, this identity of being a Marine. So from the time that I was very little, I knew this was something that I wanted to do. At the same time, it's not something that you just get to have. You have to actually earn this title of Marine by completing a rigorous boot camp, as they call it. But once you do, for the rest of your life, in this case, you're considered a Marine. So to me, this was very, very important. And when I joined the Marines, I said, okay, well, I'm a Marine now what? I decided I wanted to be even tougher. So I decided to go into the Special Forces. I wanted that to be part of my identity. These are things that we have to earn in order to really incorporate them and see a way that they almost expand our notion of who we are and the role that we play either at school or at work or in life. And so I saw great examples in the video, for example, around the Entrepreneurship Society and the Writer Society and the Aquatic Society. These are things that if you become a member of these societies, perhaps that enhances your identity. You see yourself as a writer. You see yourself as a person who engages in thoughtful debate, for example. These things become ways that we extend who we are. We almost embiggen who we are inside of the roles that we play in our life. Another important thing I learned in the Marines was all about performance. Now, if you think about performance and excellence, this is something that the Marines really focus on. And with good reason. The job that they do is very, very important. But at the same time, it doesn't just happen. You have to have a tremendous amount of planning, and training, and discipline, and execution. Now, in your life as students, you also expect high performance. Your teachers expect high performance from you, your parents, your grandparents. You have to expect performance of yourself. And recognizing that this is something that doesn't just happen, but it's something that is very worthy of pouring our time, our effort, our attention into these things. And we always want to make sure that we have high expectations for ourselves because we don't want to play small. We don't want to be lazy. We don't want to take shortcuts, for example, because these things don't produce the type of excellence that is our true potential. So when you're thinking about performance, this is an important dimension of your scholastic experience, but also your life experience. And the last one I'll share is a little bit more complex. It's around systems. What we find is that in the Marines, as an example, it's not just about the troops on the ground who are very local and walking around, for example, in a given operational area, but there's also airplanes and helicopters in the sky. There's also ships in the sea. And to coordinate all of these components in a way that's safe for the operating members of the military, there's a lot of communication, collaboration, coordination, and design that has to happen. I was thinking about you as students. You're in this beautiful hall, all the chairs, nicely arranged. If you think about the systems that it takes just to make an event like this possible, you have technology systems, you have facility systems, you have scheduling that takes place. It's an incredible amount of coordination among different groups, all having different responsibilities that have to culminate into the moment that we can have this wonderful session. I'm halfway around the globe from you, but we're sharing time and space together because all of the systems worked. Everyone did their jobs and brought us to this moment. That's powerful. And another thing that I'm picking up on very quickly here is that we see very complex examples, very powerful examples of the things I'm talking about in everyday life. We don't have to look any further than the moment that we're in, for example, to see some of these principles playing out. Unfortunately, we normally are so preoccupied with our thoughts and our activities and our task lists and the chatter that takes place in our minds that we sometimes stop to recognize the lessons and the opportunities around us. So I love examples like this where we can start to connect some of these concepts of identity and performance and systems, and you can think about yourself. What aspects of your identity are you most proud of? What are you working towards that you'd like to incorporate as well? The same thing with performance and then also on the systems. So those were some of my earliest lessons from my Marine Corps life. When I left the military, I went to a software company. So I really resonate with the technology of the podcast you're producing and Entrepreneurship Lab. Those were my early experiences with technology and business as a software builder. And one of the first things I learned in my civilian job was around the importance of goals. I learned, for example, that there's two types of goals. There are performance goals, which are basically the ability to hit a target. Like, let's say you want to do 10 push-ups, that you would say, did I do 10 push-ups or not? Then there are also mastery goals. Mastery goals are more like being able to play an instrument really well. You don't measure it the same way, but you progress and you invest your time and energy toward that. I also learned that goals were really directive in the sense that they helped you make decisions. They helped to understand whether something was going to move you closer to your goal or whether it was going to move you further away from that goal. But also, when we set goals properly, they're very energizing. They really help us to generate the motivation and the energy we need to be able to pursue that goal. So this was a business translation, if you will, but it became important for me to set goals both at the individual level, the team level, the organization level. So I started to see these combinations of goals, layers, if you will, of goals. And you might find the same thing in your own scholastic work. You have your own personal goals, but if you're part of a club, if you're part of a group project, then you have collective goals as well. Both are delightful, both are important. We have to set smart goals for ourselves, and it's a very powerful thing to be good at setting goals. Another thing in the business world, of course, is that we have customers. We have people who purchase our products and services. But in here I want to use customer almost as a metaphor. The reality is I had customers who were inside of my company too. They weren't paying us money, they were just my coworkers. But I treated them and I learned to treat them as customers. Because there's this notion of providing services to one another. And this customer-centric mindset is really important when building software because you want to understand, for example, the user's experience. Are they having an easy time with the software or not? I'm sure you've used some programs that seem elegantly designed and some software programs that seem very frustrating because they weren't designed very well at all. The same is true with the experiences we have even with one another. So from a student perspective, your customer, you might consider to be your teacher. If you're going to turn in a paper, what's their experience like reading your paper? Is it sloppy, full of mistakes, or has it been presented very thoughtfully, very well? And so that's an example of a customer. But your teammates also, if you're working on a group project or if you're in one of these societies, they're your customer too. If you think about the experience that they're having working alongside you on a team, it's helpful to think of them the same way that we think of customers in the business sense. Even if we're not selling products and services, it's still a very helpful mindset to get good at understanding how to please your customer, how to make sure they're having a great experience. Another example was around teamwork. There's two things that I learned about teamwork very early. One was that it was a multiplier effect, in the sense that where I could only do so much as an individual person, when I had multiple team members, we could accomplish that much more. So for example, at one stage as an early career manager, I led a team of 4 people. So we could do 4 times as much work because there was 4 of us. But the other thing I learned about teamwork is that we had strengths that complemented one another. Not everyone was great at the things I was great at, and I had gaps and things that I wasn't good at that my other teammates were. So not only were we able to take on more work, by working as a team, we were able to take on a different character of work and cover more types of variety of tasks and these sorts of things. The same is going to be true for you as well. The reality of your work together is that you will not always have all of the strengths, all of the requirements to be able to accomplish a given task, for example. So by combining your strengths as a team, you're able to achieve that much more. You saw the picture of me in the funny hat where I got my doctoral degree in psychology. And I had decided to take on the PhD journey because I fell in love with professional development, with leadership, and I wanted to build on my technical skills of building software, but to do that by studying people. And so one of the first things I learned by studying at the highest level is that we have theories for the way the world works. We have theories that we can apply to try to get favorable results. I'll take the first example of the entrepreneurship society that I saw in the video. We have theories, for example, of entrepreneurship, how it works, how to build a successful business, and we believe that if we apply those theories, then we will do better than if we just acted however we might like and just hope for the best. So no matter what domain interests you the most, maybe it's art, or biology, or sports, there are theories that exist. And to me, this was very reassuring that I could learn from professors, from researchers, from scientists who went before me to understand the world better, to understand things that could improve my chances of success. So theories become very important to us. At the same time, this notion of scholarship, which is really about study, also is important because you end up learning how to study at the level where you are today, for example, in school, and that notion of how you study will evolve if you continue on to study at the graduate level and on to doctoral level, or even just in life. We're constantly learning, but how we learn changes. So one of the things that I found interesting was to do the type of study and scholarship at the highest level really really built on skills I had developed very early in my scholastic career. So where you are today, one of the most important things you can do is learn how you prefer to learn. Do you like to learn through electronic materials? Do you read them through? Do you skim? How do you take your notes? How do you store away the information you might want to refer to later? What time of day do you prefer to study? If you have to write a paper, are you better writing at night or first thing in the morning? It's as important to learn about how you learn as it is what you learn. And this was interesting for me. And it's something that continues to show up. Even though I've left school a long time ago, I continue to learn. I read, for example, Buddhist scripture every morning, and I'm still learning. And I'm learning how I prefer to learn. So these skills that I learned when I was your age, that I learned 15 years ago when I was studying at the highest level, and I continue to learn today, and I expect to for the rest of my life, is an evolution. But the foundation of scholarship is what you're developing where you sit today. And the last in this example is practice. All of the theories, all of the study that we do won't matter if we don't put things into practice. We have to change our mindset. We have to change our understanding and awareness. We have to change our behaviors if we're going to have the impact in this world that we want to have. And so, as an example, it's one thing to know how to start a business, for example, and to have all the great theories and all the knowledge, but if you never go out and start that business, then it's really an academic exercise versus something that can really benefit others if you have an idea that you think would help people in the marketplace. And it's an important point that we translate what it is that we learn into our world. In the introduction, they mentioned that I am the Vice President of Predictive Index. I've been there for 11 years now. And Predictive Index is a workforce assessment company. So we basically match people to jobs and help provide coaching and development. One of the first things that I learned there was the importance of mission. So the mission for the Predictive Index is called Better Work, Better World. If we improve the world's workplaces and people's work experiences, the world will get better because we'll be able to have those employees take those positive experiences home to their families, to their community. And when you think about how many people work, that's a lot of time that we spend at work. And so this is a very worthy mission to be able to help people have better work experiences and outcomes. You may find that the mission for your school, the mission that you set for yourself, maybe for one of these societies that you're a member of, these types of missions become very important for us to internalize. They connect us to something very, very powerful. So missions change organization to organization, but the presence of a mission is something that people in the working world today want to feel more than ever. In the post-pandemic world, people really want to connect with something bigger than themselves. They want to experience purpose and meaning, and mission is a great way for them to do that. The other thing that I learned there was around scale. So the Predictive Index, for example, has 10,000 clients around the world, 10,000 businesses that use the products and services provided by the Predictive Index. There are companies that are 10 times the size of that, big, big companies. And the point I'm making here is that we can do things at a very small scale, individually, maybe a slightly larger scale, like a team, or maybe a 10-person company, all the way up to extremely large organizations that have massive impact. When you think about the computer technologies, for example, from Microsoft or Google, these are massive organizations that are making their computer capabilities available to the world. So scale vary from very small to very large, but it's important to point out that the nature of how we do our work and the experience that we have in that work changes as we change our scale. And finally, partnership. When we think about all the different groups that it takes between customers, partners, suppliers, vendors, lots of different organizations working, I would say in pursuit of their own interests and other interests all at the same time. So for example, if a customer purchases a product from the predictive index, they're looking to solve their own problem, but they're doing it in partnership with the predictive index as a provider, if you will. So that spirit of partnership is a relationship like any other, and it has to be nurtured, it has to be honored, it takes constant investment and vigilance. And so, about a year ago, I had taken all these experiences I've shared so far, from military service to leading teams in business, software sense, to the work I do with predictive index and my studies, and I wrote a book called Expand the Circle. You heard a little bit about it. And my journey as an author taught me a few things as well. The first is around authenticity. When I first sat down to write a book, my editor said, "You have to write a book that's authentic." And I thought, really? Because at the time I was thinking about my Western concepts of psychology and leadership, and at the same time what was bubbling forth inside of me from a very deep place was my newfound interest in Tibetan Buddhism. And I'm trying to understand how concepts from very ancient wisdom traditions, contemplative tradition, actually are showing up and having an impact in the very modern Western world. And so to be authentic meant that I had to expose my early thinking, some things that aren't talked about, to be honest, in Western society as much. But it was the only way I could move forward. I had to embrace that authenticity. And I've been so happy that I did. Everything became more natural for me. It became more effortless. Any fears that I had that I would be not taken seriously or people would think less of me, exactly the opposite has happened. So for me, it was a lesson to say that we are who we are for a reason. We've had a set of experiences, we have certain capabilities, we have certain preferences. And if we allow those things to come out of us naturally, then we will be seen, we will be heard, people will respond to us the way that we wish to be responded to. Another thing I learned was around community. There was a community of other authors who were going on a journey and we were able to support one another. There was a community of readers who've been able to share with me how much the book has meant to them, how some of the insights may have helped them in a moment of need. All of these interconnections, interrelationships of a community become very important. And the community itself takes on a life of its own. We may not see it the same way as we do with organization, where it says you're an employee or you're a member of the debate society, but there's community nonetheless. And so community fulfills this basic human need that we have for affiliation and connection. And I found that through a book that I had written. This is a very powerful transformation that you can take a blank page and pour your experiences and your ideas into it in a way that communicated something to a group of people who then became a community. That was an act of creation, of generation that I had never experienced before. And I feel so blessed and fulfilled to have had that experience. And it's possible for all of you as well. You can create communities, you can join and contribute to communities. And being a part of a community like that, and certainly creating one, is a unique human experience that we all deserve. And finally, resonance. I mentioned that when people would read the work and something would connect with them, something would benefit them, something would create this warmth for them, it was a very deepening of a relationship we had. Sometimes people who I've never even met would say, "What you wrote really moved me." And I thought, how is that possible? That an idea that I had, and I wrote in a book, you found somehow, and you read it and it made an impact. For me, this was a profound shift in my thinking of what's possible for us. As you think about the work that you do, the papers that you write, scholastic pursuits, the podcasts that you produce, the place on Goldman, you're sending these ripples out into the universe, if you are into that analogy, and they resonate with people. The work is meaningful, and there's a depth and a warmth to that experience. So you can see that there's a dashed line at the end of author because I don't know what comes next for me. I know a lot more than I did, and I couldn't have predicted all the experiences that I would have along the way. But a part of what comes next for me is helping use my insights my ability to translate complex ideas into hopefully simple ones, will be a part of how I can help the ability to start to make an impact in a bigger way. What I want to do is shift a little bit and show you a three-part progressive framework that can help us understand where we're coming from and how we can be of benefit both to the work that we do and those around us. The first of the three paths I call the path of production. In the frame of mind we can think about here is around this task orientation. But when you think about the outcomes, what we're trying to see from this path and this approach, are these things around efficiency, quality, reliability. So I'll take the example I saw in the video of producing a podcast. Producing a podcast episode, weekly, monthly, whatever it might be, you have to develop a certain amount of efficiency, otherwise it takes so much time that you're not able to keep up with the schedule. At the same time, you want your guests' ideas to come through in a very quality way, and you want the reliability of always making sure you ship your episodes when people expect them. Just one simple example I saw from the video of the podcast. You could pick something more meaningful if you don't work on that particular program. But when we have a task orientation, the relationship between the task, what I like to call the work to be done, and the person doing the work looks like this. When I was in the Marine Corps, they taught us mission accomplishment, troop welfare in that order. What that meant was that the mission was going to get accomplished. The work had to be done. And if people suffered or didn't suffer, it was really irrelevant. The work mattered the most. And so you probably have done this too in your own life. If you've ever pursued a task at the expense of your own self-care, for example, like putting off your paper until late in the evening, and then you have to stay up late to finish it, and it's not very comfortable. This type of thing means that we place the task ahead of our own well-being and our own experience, as an example. So the relationship of task over person really characterizes the path of production. And many companies today are operating in this fashion. They're very focused on profits, they're very focused on sales or the work to be done, more so than they care about the employee experience or even the customer experience. And as we'll find out, this is short-sighted. That's not to say this is always a problem. But if we overlead, or if we lead too much, or we overdo this type of approach, it can become problematic. The way that this tends to work is this process of reduction. When you think about, for example, a problem exists in the business, well, we start to find out how do we reduce this down to components of it? What went wrong? If you think about a factory line, which is the machine? Which part of the machine is causing the defect? And this reductionist approach works actually really well. When you think about classical science, Newtonian physics, for example, when we break things down to the simplest components, it helps us understand how our world works, and also gives us great theories about how we can bend it to our will, I would say. So this reductionist approach, tends to work. And some of the sample practices we see, for example, in this path of production, the first one is around goal setting. I talked about goal setting a little bit earlier, and it really shows up here as well. When you think about how do we set goals that help us produce the outcomes we want. So for example, if you have a goal of getting a certain grade in school, if you want to get high marks, well, that's a great goal, and then you can work backward from that and say, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make sure I turn in my work on time and participate in class, whatever it might be. So goals help us really focus our energies and our efforts. Another one is around the way we design our processes. I'll stick with the example of turning in a paper. If you write a paper differently every time, it's very difficult to get good at the process of writing a paper. On the other hand, if you say, no, I know how I write best. I like to collect my research, and then I take a break, and then I go and I draw an outline, and then I expand the outline, and then I make a final draft, or however that works. That process is something that you can deliberately design, and then you can work to improve it over time. And you can see where that would give you more efficiency, higher quality in terms of the papers that you write. Another common example in business, of course, is around troubleshooting. When we find that things don't always work out, and it seems like there's just an endless array of problems and challenges that arise in business, Then we start to do the troubleshooting thing and start to find out where is something going wrong. This reductive process of saying what step in the journey, which part of the issue. Let's say there was a computer glitch, a bug. Well, we would find out what function in the computer programming is causing the error, what specific line of code is causing the error, or which subroutine. And so this reductive way of saying, how do we find out? Drill down, if you will, to where the problem is. And the last point here is around standardization. When we want something to be similar every time, I'll give you a very simple example. When you showed some of the other speakers who have appeared before me in earlier sessions, there was a lot of similarities in the branding, in the presentation, the visuals of how you introduced those people. That was a way that we could communicate this is the part of this program, this series, which is really nice. So that sort of standardization is a common outcome or objective, if you will, for the path of production. Now, the path of production has tremendous positives. We've seen so much advancement in the Western world in particular when it comes to producing all the goods, the services, every airplane, every highway, everything has been really a result of this approach to production. But the challenge that we run into is that it's incomplete. There's very little on the screen you can see that talks about the role of the worker. It's almost as if we think that strategy, technology, process almost happen automatically, as if we don't have people. But we know that people have experiences. You can think if you had a class of students, for example, that got highest marks, every one of them, but had a terrible experience doing it, that wouldn't be a successful classroom. Because there's more to the work, the life that we have than just the results in the production. And that brings us to the path of people. Talent optimization is a relatively new discipline that really seeks to do a couple of things. One is that it wants to recognize the fact that none of what we have described to this point, the path of production, goes away. We're building onto it by adding the path of people. So you can see that my green box at the top is still there, but I've added the blue box of people. When we're thinking about people at work or people in a school setting like yours, we want to ensure that they're having the highest possible levels of engagement. So are they bringing energy and having a great experience? Well-being, are they feeling free of stress? Are they having positive experience in that regard? And then a sense of purpose, that they feel that they can contribute. When you think about the relationship, talent optimization puts the task and the person on the same plane, same level. They're equally important. In addition, there's this mutually reinforcing relationship between the person doing the work and the impact that work has on the person. So, for example, let's say you're in the Astronomy Society, and you're able to make a discovery and write a paper or see something that no one has seen before, or at least that no one in your school has seen before. Then all of a sudden, there's this role that you played in making that discovery, and the discovery itself enhances the way that you feel about the work that you put into it. There's this reciprocal effect, and so the two interact with one another. So at this point, the astronomer and the astronomical discovery are inseparable. The two are dependent on one another, they reinforce one another. The approach that we take in this regard is one of overlap. When you think about the space in a Venn diagram like this, if we overlap, we're trying to maximize that area. So an example might be the fit between the person and the job. Now, I am a lousy mathematician. If I were part of the math club, that would be a very poor fit. There wouldn't be much overlap between me and the need, the work, to do sophisticated maths, for example. So in this example, that's the fit of the person of the job. But also, what about coworkers? Two people working together. If we can maximize the surface area of those two people, then all of a sudden that's going to give us a better outcome. The same is true for a person in the team, or for two teams working together in partnership. So you can see how the relationship between the two takes on a very important meaning. Some of the practices that happen on the path of people is around collaboration. We can do so little when we work by ourselves. But when we work together as humans in a group, we can do amazing things. Everything around us. You know, if you think about the projector that's projecting my image onto your screen, that was the result of many, many people working together to design the projector, to produce it, to have it shipped to the location, who had to install it. Every product, every service, every experience we have is the culmination of a collaboration between lots of people we may never meet. But the point is that the collaboration is where the most essential and most powerful products and services are created. Very rarely today do we experience something that was created wholly by one person all by themselves. Another important example is around feedback. How do we learn how others are experiencing us? What are our strengths? What are the improvement areas we need to pursue? How can I make our relationship better? These are all examples of feedback. And feedback is not always easy to receive, but it's always a gift. If we come to the feedback moment with an open heart and an open mind, then we're able to raise our awareness and to grow. If we shut ourselves off from feedback, we become stagnant, we become isolated, and we can't improve, and we can't make the type of contribution that we want to otherwise. So in the talent optimization framework, Path of People, feedback is something that we eagerly seek. We prepare ourselves that some of it will be positive, but not all of it, and that's okay. It's important to have the awareness and to make an earnest attempt to improve ourselves and to improve the quality of our work. Another example that's important.
Matt, could I interrupt you for a moment?
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, now we are almost at 5:55. So the session
Okay.
usually gets terminated by 6:10. So I thought it would be a
Okay.
right time to engage our audience. Now, students are here with some good questions. Probably with the questions we can take it forward. How do you feel about this?
That will be just fine.
Okay. So just to begin the Q&A session. So Matt could take it forward from that.
All right, that sounds great.
Please introduce your name, your class, and please.
Good evening, sir. My name is Sai Samanyu and I'm at 8th standard. I have a question for you, sir. Can you share
Yes,
us
please.
can you share us an example of a leadership challenge you faced and how you overcame it?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question. I have faced many numerous leadership challenges. One of the challenges that I faced, I'll give you an example. I had someone who worked for me who was a very valued worker, came to me one day and said, I've decided to take a job at another company. Now, in that moment, I had a decision to make. Was I going to be angry? Was I going to be frustrated? Was I going to be sad? And what I decided to do in that moment is to turn to a very human response. And I looked at him not from my own perspective of what his departure was going to mean to me, but instead I tried to put all my energy into what he was experiencing. He was excited about the new role. He was looking forward to new challenges. He was a dear friend of mine in addition to being a coworker and someone who worked for me for many years. And so at that moment, I was nothing but happy for him. And so I allowed myself to express to him my appreciation for all the work he had done and for my excitement for what he was going to do next. And he looked at me and he said, I have to tell you, that is such a relief. I was so nervous about telling you. I was afraid to tell you. I had anxiety. I couldn't sleep for days. And you put me at ease. Now, it wasn't easy in the coming weeks to replace him and to message to the team and to make sure that they weren't afraid. But in that moment, I feel like I made the right choice, which was the human choice.
Can we have another question, please?
Please.
Sir, my name is Gauramani. I'm from class 9. So my question is that what qualities do you believe are essential for effective leadership and how can someone develop these qualities?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of qualities for effective leadership. When I think about the most important, it's to deliver results. We have to recognize that as leaders, we're counted on to accomplish the mission. It's not sufficient alone, but the point being that if if you have a job to do, then we have to understand completely how to get that job done. So the first quality is around studying the system that within which you operate. So for example, in the business, do we fully understand the business? Are we fully putting ourselves in the resources? Are we making decisions to produce the result we want? But the second is around ensuring that the employees and the coworkers, the team members, whatever the context, are also having a great experience. So the fact is that there's this indelible link between the employee's quality of the experience and the work product. This is true in knowledge societies, in information technologies, in more advanced forms of work, even in construction. When you think about it, if the workers are having a bad experience, the quality of their work might slip, the timeliness of the project might slip. So we need to both make sure that the work gets done and that people are having a good experience. But the last quality, I think, is the most challenging. And that's for a leader to go beyond their own self-interest, to move beyond their personal sort of potentially fears and anxieties. What will my boss say? What will happen if? And really fully give over to the mission, the work being done, as well as the welfare of the workers doing that work. That's hard for leaders because we tell leaders that it's all about you. But what we find in more advanced areas of spiritual leadership approach, for example, is that's not true. You're trying to remove yourself from the equation and let the flow naturally happen. So I would say progressively in that order, those are some of the key qualities. Being able to deliver the results that are needed, to ensure that the people delivering those results are having the experience that they deserve, and also removing yourself from the equation to the greatest extent possible.
Please, another question. The senior students. Yes, please.
Hello sir, my name is Manish PS, studying in second PUC. What are some common misconceptions about spiritual leadership that you frequently encounter?
Yeah, the first is that it's somehow a taboo subject inside of business. There's this notion and a discomfort, I would say, because in many cases we consider spirituality and religiosity to be the same thing. They're related, but they're not the same thing. What's happened, for example, in the United States is a steady decline in religiosity, where people don't necessarily identify with a specific traditional religion, but at the same time, they're still experiencing what they would consider spirituality, which is an interest in purpose and meaning and belonging in something bigger than oneself, and some of the answers to the questions that we have just existentially. Unfortunately, in work, there has been that sort of sensitivity to the term. But increasingly, what we're finding is that practices like mindfulness, an interest in compassion and restoring humanity to the work experiences are being demanded by employees. They don't want to work for organizations that are large, cold, transactional, technical organizations that don't care about people. So I would say that one of the biggest challenges is the sensitivity, misplaced or otherwise, that sometimes business has around bringing in spiritual concepts to work. The reality is they're coming to work in the form of the workers, and it's wholly appropriate as long as we are unified, I would say, and inclusive in the way that we treat those topics. Another challenge is that it's a little bit more ephemeral, if you will, a little harder, a little less tangible to talk about spirituality at work. And that's a direct opposition to that reductionist approach I shared earlier. As engineers, we like things to be very rational, very objective, very predictable, and people are anything but. What we're finding, though, is when we take away the human qualities and some of the more spiritual things that are a little bit more abstract, we remove a lot of the spirit of the workplace, things like creativity and innovation, and a lot of the human needs that we have. So the rise, for example, of artificial intelligence has not supplanted our need to have human experiences. So I would say those are the two chief challenges I see. One is people feel like we can't talk about spirituality at work, which is not true. The other is that because it doesn't fit nicely into rational boxes, then it's somehow less valuable. And in that regard, I take my inspiration from quantum physics, which is a nice complement to classical physics. Both are useful in very different ways, and I think the same is true for spirituality and the traditional forms of work. These are excellent questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Namaste, sir. My name is Nishan Bharat and I'm from second PUC. Sir, since you have completed an Ironman triathlon, can you please explain how you train for it physically and mentally?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take you back to the very beginning. The very first time I heard about the Ironman itself, and for those unfamiliar, this is a 2.4 mile ocean swim, followed immediately by a 112-mile bike ride, and then followed immediately by a marathon running. So 3 events over the course of less than 17 hours, you have to complete this. And when I first learned about this endurance race, I thought, I don't know that I could do that. And immediately there was a part of my brain that said, who said that? As if, who's to doubt me? And I thought, well, let's take a look at the facts. You can't swim the length of a pool, you don't own a bicycle, and you're a very slow runner. Ironman's perfect for me. So I've always been the kind of person who really sets very lofty goals for myself and rises to the challenge. But it took me 4 years to be able to train for that race because I had to learn how to swim. And I actually had to purchase a bike and learn how to ride it safely. And running is very different after you've done those other 2 events. So I was training it progressively. I turned to a set of books and techniques to refine, my skill, if you will. And I remember very early when I started swimming, I swam about halfway through the pool. I was choking. I had to stand up. It was just a lap pool. And I got and crawled basically to the edge of the pool, and there was a note there. And the note said, you need my help. Come join my master swim program. And it was a coach who had seen me struggling, flailing, and she said, come to my program. I'll modify the exercises for you. I'll teach you basically how to swim. So it was a combination of study, a combination of getting help from other people who had knowledge and support that I needed, as well as just my own effort and consistently every week stretching my distances further and further and proving to myself that I could do this. Right before the race, probably about 6 or 8 weeks before the race, I had a bike crash. My tire got caught in a train track, and it threw me to the ground, and it cracked my helmet, and I was completely concussed, lying in the street. Someone had to help me to my feet. I was bloody, bruised, and I thought, oh no, I've worked for, at that point, 3.5 years. How am I going to get back to this? And I was gracious with myself. I gave myself a little bit of time off, but eventually I got my way back into training, and I was able to show up for the event. The day of the event, it took me 2 hours to do the swim, which is a very long time, but within the allowed limit, and I felt amazing. The sun was shining, it was beautiful, my confidence was so high. The bike took 7.5 hours for me, and the marathon took over 5 hours. So I was one of the slowest competitors in that race ever, but I was so happy that over the course of 4 years, I had gone from not being able to do any of the events to being able to do them all on the same day. So that was some of the mental challenges came from being able to up my awareness, my education, support of people around me, the proof to myself that I could do it. All those things culminated on that day, and it became something that I'm very proud of.
Matt, on a lighter note, I wanted to share how I was able to meet you. Because some of my students will ask, how did you come in touch with Matt Poepsel from G? So that's one interesting thing they would like to know. So my contact with him is from a couple of years. I met him on LinkedIn and we set up a conversation. And Sometime back, before he released his book, Expand the Circle, he had emailed me to write a small introduction or preview of that book. So I just put down a couple of points. I was happy with it. That's how we start the relationship. And also, I invited him, I think probably a year and a half back, that I would like to invite you for this focus session. And so I'm happy that this time has finally come and you've been able to talk to our students, and we are happy with your wonderful insights. I'm sure that the students, though at a young in age, 8th grade to 12th grade, they'll be able to take this experience with them forward and make a mark in their lives. So we'll pass it on to the students once again.
Hello, sir. My name is Krishay and I'm of 10th standard. So, in your experience, what's the most effective ways a leader can lead people during times of crisis? And what is the most, in such situations, how can leaders maintain productivity and morale, sir?
Yes, I think that crisis situations are very challenging to navigate. And what we find in the research is that our normal tendency to want to be humanistic leaders, to want to allow a lot of participation, almost a democratic leadership style, it's very popular today, is actually the wrong way to behave during a crisis. During a crisis, authoritative leadership tends to outperform other styles because decisions must be made very quickly. So therefore, one person making the decision is going to be more effective. We need swift action as opposed to a lot of deliberation consideration. So in times where it's calm, for example, if you're on a computer programming team, let's say, then it's great to have a lot of collaboration. Let's get a lot of input. Let's talk about lots of things. Let's have everyone have an equal say. But if all of a sudden there's a crisis, like there's been a couple of high-profile computer issues that affected global travel and other types of things recently, for example, when that's happening, then an authoritative leadership style where someone is clearly in charge, making the decisions, still taking input perhaps, but being very swift is important. Helping a team get through a crisis like that, we have to do two things. One is to recognize the fact that we are in a crisis mode. We don't want to pretend that things are fine. They're not fine. We're in a crisis mode. Things are going to be challenging for a while. This is going to not be fun for a while. We want to be realistic about it. But at the same time, the leader must ensure that we never lose hope that better days are ahead. There's something called the Stockdale paradox, and it was from a gentleman who was caught in a prisoner of war camp and found that people that had prisoners that had a frank and realistic view in the short term, but also never lost the optimistic, positive, hopeful view of the long term, were the ones who fared the best in that very challenging situation. And the same is true during a crisis. So we want to be realistic with our team that this is going to stink, this is going to hurt, this isn't going to be fun. But at the same time, this isn't forever. We're going to get to the other side of this. We're going to get back to building the business, whatever it might be, the way that we want.
Thank you for that wonderful question, Krishay. I now request Girish MP of second PUC to deliver the vote of thanks and summarize the session. To begin with, I would really like to thank Swamiji for organizing such an insightful program. And also, I thank Mr. Poepsel for sharing his experiences and his perspective of spiritual leadership. He has quite creatively briefed us about how we can relate our lives to movies, and from his marine days to be tougher, to build our identity, how to improve and upgrade our performance and skill set, importance of systematic scheduling and essentialities of goals and mastery of our individual and organizational goals. And from his civilian days, the strength and merits of teamwork, his love towards professional development, importance of theories, and to learn how to learn. And let's conclude the session with Shanti Mantra.
Just a minute. I just want to quote Matt Poepsel here. He just mentioned a very interesting thing in the course of his small talk. He said, everyone did their job and brought us to this movement. It could be our wonderful team of volunteers, not the office bearers, the team who have worked backstage. And he said that is powerful. So I'm happy for all of you to be a part of this focus session, to join us today. And take this forward. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Matt. Namaste. Namaste. Thank you.